Let's talk some specifics about the business landscape. Two complex economies, both are in some ways an arms race over AI and other innovations. Let's start with kind of the links, the trade links, the fact that supply chains, while perhaps less dependent on China, are very much still placed in that country, in the region. What is the status of that in your mind in terms of both what's happening today and what you would advise business leaders for tomorrow?
Well, trade between the United States and China is declining. And we know this from the U.S. Department of Commerce figures for the first 10 months of this year, where merchandise trade between China and the United States was down 19 point, I think it was 3 or 8%. So almost 20%. Year on year. And I think that tells us a lot about the trade patterns. Investment patterns, we are seeing two things happen. First of all, there's the Biden administration gets great credit for imposing curbs on sensitive technologies being transferred to China. It's not doing enough, but it's made some important advances. And second of all, Xi Jinping has been pushing foreign business out of China. So, for instance, we have seen in the third quarter of 2023 a net disinvestment from China by foreign investors. The first time this has happened since records been kept since 1998. And that trend is only going to accelerate because Xi Jinping is making sure that the Chinese market is reserved for Chinese entities. So I think the message to business is certainly going to be your time in China is limited. And that specifically is true of a company called Apple. We are seeing the Chinese government and the party go after Apple relentlessly. Most recently with these bans on bringing Apple products into the office, which is basically a reimposition of rules, which are quite some time, but they're putting more effort into enforcement. They're really getting behind Huawei. And the message to a company like Apple is, you have no long-term future in China as long as Xi Jinping is around. And I don't think the equity markets have understood that yet. But what's true with Apple is true with a lot of other companies as well. There is just no future in China along this current trajectory.
When you say the equity markets, are you talking about investors in Apple, or are you talking about investors in China funds? In what respect should the equity markets catch up to reality?
Yeah, on that specific statement, I was referring to investors in Apple.
Okay.
I don't think that they understand Apple's problems in China, the severity of them, and that Apple basically can't do anything about it. Because as long as Xi Jinping's there, Apple is a goner, I think. But when you start to look at investment in China, just the 30,000 picture, as you put it, Xi Jinping really wants to make sure that Chinese companies take advantage of the Chinese market. And he's basically really referring to state enterprises. So even privately owned companies like Alibaba and Tencent, which are really good companies, I think have a really hard time looking forward. But, got to remember, and if you're going to go up to that high level again, remember, the Chinese economy is really distressed right now for a number of reasons. It's not growing at the 5.2% pace that they claimed for the first 3 quarters of this year. We don't know how fast it's growing, if it's growing at all. But, you can make a case for anything from -1 to +1. But I don't think you can make a case for much more. Even though 2022 was a really bad year, there's a lot of really bad signs for the current period right now.